Get comfortable. Let your head settle into the pillow. Allow your hands to rest wherever they naturally fall. Take a slow breath in and let it go. You don't need to understand anything tonight. You don't need to know what's coming next. For the next little while, you can simply just be here, somewhere between the person you've been and the person you're becoming. There's a season of life no one really prepares you for. It doesn't arrive with an invitation. There is no announcement, no date circled on a calendar. You simply wake one morning and things that once fit just don't anymore. The conversations you used to enjoy begin to feel strangely empty. Places you once loved become places you've outgrown. You find yourself craving quiet when you once needed noise. You begin protecting mornings, not answering every call, sitting in the car for an extra minute before going inside, watching the sky change colors, and for no particular reason, something just starts happening. You just don't have a name for it yet. And at first, it can feel like loneliness. You wonder whether you've become difficult, distant, too sensitive, maybe even a little strange. People invite you places, and sometimes you just rather stay home. Someone begins telling you the latest gossip, and somewhere halfway through the story, you realize you don't care. And not because you don't care about people, because of course you do. Maybe more deeply than before. You simply don't want to spend your energy everywhere anymore. And then there are the questions. They arrive quietly, usually at inconvenient times, while folding laundry, standing beneath warm water in the shower, driving home alone, lying awake at 2:13 in the morning, watching shadows move across the ceiling. Is this the life I really want? Why did I tolerate that for so long? When did I stop doing the things that made me happy? Who would I be if I wasn't trying to be who everyone needed me to be? And perhaps the most frightening question of all, who am I now? See, there isn't always an answer. That's the part nobody tells you. Awakening isn't necessarily an answer. Sometimes it's simply becoming brave enough to ask the question. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, you begin noticing things. A song you've heard 100 times suddenly sounds different. A sentence in a book seems written specifically for you. You think about someone, and moments later their name appears on your phone. You wake from a dream carrying a feeling you can't quite explain. You glance at the clock and notice the same numbers you've been seeing everywhere lately. Sure, maybe it's a coincidence. Maybe it isn't. Eventually, you stop needing to decide. You simply notice. And somehow noticing feels good. You begin spending more time outside, not hiking mountains, not chasing enlightenment, just outside, bare feet against cool grass, morning sunlight through the kitchen window, the smell of rain before it even arrives, the moon hanging impossibly large above houses you've driven past 1,000 times. You realize the world has always been doing this. You've simply been too busy to notice. Maybe you begin praying again. Not the prayers you memorized as a child. Something quieter, less formal. Sometimes there aren't even words. Sometimes prayer is simply sitting in darkness and admitting, I just don't know. Sometimes it's asking for guidance. Sometimes it's gratitude. Sometimes it's anger. Sometimes it's nothing more than please stay with me. And then sitting quietly enough to perhaps feel that something does and something's there. You begin trusting yourself differently, not perfectly. You still second guess, still overthink, still occasionally ignore the little voice inside you. And later, you laugh because, of course, it was right. But you hear it now, And that's the part that matters. And your life begins changing in ways almost nobody else can see. You stop explaining certain decisions. You forgive people without inviting them back. You miss someone without calling them. You love people without carrying them. You discover that boundaries don't always need speeches. Sometimes a boundary is simply no. Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's leaving. And sometimes it's choosing to just not return. And there are softer changes. You buy flowers simply because they're beautiful. You use the good perfume on an ordinary Tuesday for the office. You open the windows. You play music while making dinner. You laugh louder and dance harder and faster. You rest without earning it first. You become more selective about who gets access to you, and strangely more generous with those who do. There will still be difficulties. Becoming doesn't make you immune to being human. You will still lose your patience, still worry, still cry over things you thought you'd finished crying about, still occasionally looking backwards and wondering whether it would have been easier to remain who you were. But you can't. Not really. Because once you've met yourself more honestly, it's difficult to pretend you haven't. Perhaps that is what awakening actually is. Not becoming something new, but slowly removing everything that was never really you to begin with. The expectations, the performances, the old survival habits, the need to be understood by everyone, layer after layer after layer, until underneath it all, there you are, bare, not finished, not enlightened, not perfectly healed, just more your natural self. And perhaps tonight, you are somewhere inside that space, no longer completely who you were, but not yet certain who you're becoming. That's okay. There's no deadline. You don't have to rush toward the next version of yourself. You don't have to force clarity. Some answers only arrive when we stop demanding them. So tonight, let the questions rest beside you. Let tomorrow remain unwritten. Let whatever you believe in, God, the universe, your own quiet intuition, or simply the mysterious unfolding of life hold what you cannot solve tonight. You are allowed to exist in the middle, between knowing and wondering, between releasing and receiving, between who you were and whoever you are still becoming. And maybe this space isn't empty at all. Maybe this is where becoming happens. Good night.